Hey folks, Michael Mann with Michael Mann Security Services, and we're going to talk about Physical Security 101 for houses of worship. And today we're going to start with executive protection, or what we call close protection in the sanctuary. Now, where we're going to talk about this is not normally what we would start off with when we start talking about 101, but I taught a course this past weekend up in Plymouth, Indiana, for several churches in this very concept, and there are a lot of questions, and this provides a lot of interest for folks, especially today, because I think churches are moving toward assigning somebody toward a pastor, especially toward or at the bigger churches. So we're going to talk about in Physical Security 101 today, again, physical protection or the executive protection of your pastor. And again, even though this is something I probably wouldn't start with, there's just been a lot of interest. We were again teaching the course this weekend, and then I had a conversation last night at a security captain's dinner that I was invited to at another church, and this topic came up. If you have more questions about this, you can always get us at contact@michaelmannsecurityservice.com or at mmann@fbctn.org, or you can always call me at 615-956-3912. So let's get started on our first Physical Security 101 for churches and just talk about what executive protection is. So just so you understand, especially if you're not part of a security team or ministry, or if you're looking to get into that at your church and you're brand new, you're just a servant, because that's really all that's required. You don't have to have law enforcement or military background to do this, especially in churches. If you're just getting into this and you want to know what physical security is, it's just safeguarding of critical assets. Now, an asset is anything that has a positive value to the church. Sometimes the churches know what their assets are, sometimes they don't. And the critical asset, the reason why we say critical assets or the safeguarding and protection of those, is because we can't protect every asset. That is impossible. No one has enough resources to protect every asset. If you were to do that, one, you just can't do it. But if you were to do that, you'd make it to where people couldn't get into the facility, no matter what facility that is. So critical assets are those assets that we have identified where any kind of compromise would create an unacceptable risk to your church. So most of the time what this means is people, okay, especially in the church. So physical security is nothing more than the safeguarding of critical assets, and there's many functions, and executive protection is one of them. Now, when we get into the basics of executive protection, very specifically in houses of worship, just understand this is a very cross-functional element of physical security. And what that means is this requires a lot of work and a lot of different type of training. It's very specialized, like conducting a risk assessment is. And the basics for this require, number one, some sort of an assessment. So when people ask about providing protection for a pastor, the first question I ask is, have you had an assessment done on the pastor to determine whether or not he really actually needs somebody up there with him protecting him? Because if he doesn't, you're going to conflict with the mission of your protection system, and we're going to get into that. Two, there needs to be some sort of layered approach, because one single element is not going to actually be effective. We need to practice what we call the 4Ds. This is really just gets into the functions of physical security. I'll talk about this in a second. The functions of physical protection are all the same, no matter what you're protecting. The strategy in our houses of worship are different, and I'll talk about that when we cover the 4Ds. And then balance protection, which, it really should be at the top. It's the most important, especially in our environment. But I'm going to cover all four of these quickly in this PS 101, okay? So assessment, what does that mean? An assessment is an examination or evaluation of the current physical protection of that asset that you want to safeguard. Now, if you listen to any other executive protection podcast or read books from people that are providing this in the secular world, they'll bring up the word risk assessment. Let me tell you something about risk assessment. Risk assessment, like executive protection, is a very specialized skill. I've been in this industry for 25 years in law enforcement and military before that, very extensive background in both of those prior to even getting into physical security. And I will tell you, in my experience in physical protection, I know very few people that can actually do a risk assessment, even if they're certified like I am, CPP, PSP, they've had training in it. It's a very tough thing to learn how to do. It's not easy, and it's very comprehensive, and it takes time. So when you hear risk assessment, risk is where we're actually measuring risk, both threat, vulnerability, and consequence or impact of the attack. And I don't know very many people that do that very well. And that's not really required actually in the assessment of your principal, or what we're talking about here, our pastor. The principal is to protect either person that we're trying to safeguard. Most of the time, a physical security assessment or a PSA is really what's required, and that just identifies the threats to the person you're trying to protect, the vulnerabilities based on something you're not doing, and then you figure out what it is that you need to do different. That's normally what is needed in the assessment. Okay, so you'll hear the term. That's a key term thrown around in this industry, risk assessment. I don't know very many people that can do them. I've been in this 25 years again, and I learned how to actually do risk assessments working for the government. Number one, they taught me how to do them, or they paid somebody to teach me how to do them. And number two, I learned it in graduate school. But just going to a basic course, you're probably not going to learn that. And most people really don't know how to do it anyway. So just remember, a physical security assessment of that person is probably all that's needed. Now, the layered approach gets into what some people call defense in depth. And what that means is that one single element or like one single layer is ineffective for protection. The idea is that we use multiple layers, and most of the time in physical security or physical protection, we have three layers. We have an outer layer, middle layer, and inner layer, just like in your physical security plan for your facility, for what you're doing to protect the church. And the idea behind these multiple layers is that when you have multiple layers, it helps to mitigate the impact of an attack on your faith-based leader or your pastor or priest or whoever it is. So this layered approach is needed to help mitigate the impact of that attack and actually to provide effective protection of your principal or your pastor. That is the layered approach. That's what that means. Then we get into, I said the functions of physical security in any facility, person, location are all the same. It's just the strategy that is different. Well, the functions are the same. There are four basic functions. You see this in any basic physical security book. And the first is deter or deterrence. And that's my ability or my team's ability to psychologically impact the motivation of the adversary to attack the person I'm trying to protect. And we do that through physical presence. We do that through assessment. We do that through training. And we do that through, which is next, the early detection. So detection is second. Detection is my ability to see adversary activity early. Okay, so, and we do that through the use of people. People ask about cameras a lot, and I would tell you cameras in physical protection are really used to see something or to review something that's already happened based on a need to determine liability, to determine exactly, again, like in an investigation, what happened, etc. So we have deterrence, and then we have detection. The fourth element, the third element or third D is delay, and that's my ability through early detection to either psychologically slow down the adversary, which means they see us, we're an obstacle as they're doing their terrain analysis. They see us there because we're physically present and observing. And because they see us there, we psychologically delay, which means we slow them down in their attack process when they're thinking about attacking our principal. And then we can also physically delay, physically slow down. So if they do attack, maybe we didn't see it coming early, and they do attack, we step in and we are interceding as that principal's protection or as that element that tries to slow the attack down. And then denial means we keep them away from the principal or the pastor or the priest, which when we step into delay, that denies them access to that person we're trying to protect. So very basic, those are the four Ds. In other functions or other worlds, we would call this the functions of physical protection. And there are four of them. Now, in this, we can't really measure deterrence, but in assessment, we can actually measure detection, delay, and denial or response. Okay. And the last, which is really the most important, especially in our world, is balanced protection. And in executive protection in faith-based organizations, what we mean is, number one, we don't want to conflict with the mission of the church. So we're probably not going to run a diamond formation around the pastor. If you're doing that, that's either going to be inappropriate or not needed, or if it is needed, we probably need to find some other physical security strategy. Man, what's the guy doing where he needs a diamond formation around him? All right, so conflict avoidance means our security program doesn't conflict with the mission of the organization. We are present, but not overbearing. We are physically there. We are there to deter and detect. The adversary knows who we are when he or she sees us, but we're not overbearing because actually people still need access to the shepherd, right? So we're still going to let folks in. So we don't want to be overbearing, but we're still going to be present. We are safeguarding while we are mindful of the mission, going back to conflict avoidance. We're going to protect the asset, but our goal there is ministry. Our goal there is to make sure that the gospel is still preached. And the gospel is that God saves sinners that don't deserve to be saved. And the world needs to understand that, and they need to hear it. And as personal protectors, we don't need to conflict with that, and we sure don't need to stop it. So our mission does not need to conflict with the actual mission of the church. Okay. All right. So that is PS 101, executive protection, very specifically in faith-based organizations. We do have a 1 and a 3-day course in this. The 1-day course is really effective. I just did this in Indiana this past Saturday for a group of, I think it was about 6 or 7 churches. We had a large group there. Great group of guys learning how to do this. This is the agenda. We talk about security design strategies for houses of worship. We get into concepts in executive protection for churches, equipment considerations, how to conduct a threat assessment, the basics of behavior threat detection, which is that deterrence and that detection, early detection of adversary activity. Use of force concepts for private protectors, especially in the churches. If you are armed, those covert carry principles, and then of course, protective formations and immediate action procedures if we actually have to delay and deny that an attack, on that principle. Okay, so that's the agenda for the 1 and 3-day courses. If you're interested, if you got any questions, you can always get us again at contact@michaelmannsecurityservice.com, or you can get us at mman@fbctn.org. And you can always call me at 615-956-3912. And remember, folks, it is about prevention, not response.